All right, we are at 1 o'clock. See Councilmember Lawson is with us. I do not yet see Councilmember Medina, so I'm going to go ahead and shoot him a text. Hey, Councilmember Lawson, how are you? Are you feeling better?
Yes, I feel a lot better.
Glad to hear that.
It's been a long 3 weeks, I tell you.
Yeah.
So,
And second.
oops.
Yeah, Councilmember Medina says he's getting a password issue again to get in. I don't know why this keeps happening.
Okay. Yep. I sent him the direct link, so I was hoping he wouldn't have to put it in. Let me send it again. Hold on.
All right. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, so I think we'll go ahead and get the show on the road while we wait for Councilmember Medina to get through the tech issues he's experiencing. All right, so welcome everybody to our September 28th TAPS meeting. My name is Juan Marcano, and I have the honor and pleasure of chairing this committee. Councilmember Lawson, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. I'm Angela Lawson, at-large council member, and I'm the vice chair of this great committee. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are waiting for Councilmember Medina to join us. He is the third member of the committee. So I'll move us on to item 2 here, which is the approval of the August 24th meeting minutes. I do not have any comments. Councilmember Lawson?
No changes for me as well.
Fantastic. So those will stand approved. So we'll move right on into general business. We'll go to 4A, restriping roadways with overlay projects. And who is our presenter for that?
That is me.
Charlie.
Yes. Can you see my screen, hopefully?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Okay, good.
Thanks.
All right, I'll get started. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Chair Marcano and Vice Chair. My name is Carly Campuzano. I'm the traffic manager in the Public Works Department, and this presentation is on how we restripe overlays or restripe roadways with pavement maintenance projects. Just want to note that this is informational only, and this was a topic that I think was requested by Chair Marcano a few months ago. So this is an informational only presentation. So here's an agenda of what I plan to cover. First, I'll go over just a little bit of details about our annual pavement maintenance program. Then I'll go over how we conduct striping reviews in conjunction with this program. I'll touch on which projects are included as far as restriping in the 2023 overlay. So some of these are already out. So you might have already seen these already. And then I'll go over how we implement new striping projects. And then I'll also go over how we implement bike lane projects in the city without overlay projects. So first of all, just want to touch on our annual, I call it an overlay program. It's really our street maintenance program, which can include overlay and chip seal and other pavement maintenance strategies. So I know you've heard a lot about this program already and about our, the bigger package that we have this year as well from Lynn and Nicholas. So I'm not going to touch too much on that. But basically, every year, our streets department develops a list of locations that are planned for street maintenance. They normally send the initial list to us, to my group in traffic engineering, around every fall. And then we go through this list really closely to determine which projects we want to include that will be then bid out in the following spring. So from about fall to spring is when we're looking at what we want to do as far as making changes to striping. So next, just want to touch on why it's beneficial to restripe with an overlay or with the other pavement maintenance types of projects as well. So these pavement maintenance projects really just give us a clean slate of roadway to work with. So if we're looking at making big changes, it's a lot easier to make them when there's no markings on the pavement, rather than trying to make changes to a road that's already striped. Sometimes we do make some changes to roadways that already have striping on them, but in those cases, then what we have to do is conduct some removals of striping. And removals can be pretty tough. They either have to be ground off, which is really time intensive and is not great for the pavement, or there are other ways they can be removed, but they end up not being always fully removed, which is another issue. So it's really the best time to make the striping changes is when there's either a brand new roadway or when these pavement maintenance activities take place. So we really try to capitalize on that to get some of our planned improvements in with that project. So just wanted to take you through like the process of how we review roadways for striping changes. So when we get that initial list from streets, a lot of times they'll already have it included, uploaded into GIS. And so we then, we being the traffic engineering group and my team, as well as our transportation planning group, we have some different meetings where we look at each and every roadway that's planned for pavement maintenance. And we look at them to see, first of all, which roadways already have striping. And with the roadways that already have striping, are any of them already planned for bike lanes as part of our bicycle master plan? And then if they're not, we still look and see, would bike lanes make sense in this location, or are there other striping improvements that we think are needed that might not be bike lanes? So like, are there any auxiliary lane changes, intersection striping changes we think should be made? We look at all that and we develop a list. And once we have our list of projects, we also take these projects forward to a bi-monthly group we have internally at the city with a lot of different city departments. So we get others to weigh in as well, such as pros and some other folks are on those meetings. And so we try to get more input on which roadways should be included. And then from there, we also sometimes need to collect data. So if we're looking at reducing a lane, changing auxiliary lanes, then sometimes there's a data collection piece of this as well. So after all of that process, then we look at how we can implement these projects. So we then need to proceed with design plans where we actually lay out what the new striping is going to look like. We go over quantities, lane widths, all those types of details. We either create these plans internally using internal staff resources, or depending on our overall workload and how many roads we want to include, sometimes we get consultant help as well, and we'll have a consultant that we get on board to help us do these design plans. And there's normally a very quick turnaround time because we start reviewing in the fall and then we need to have them completely finalized in the spring. So there's not a whole lot of time to work with in there. So we put together the plans, we send them to streets, we give them quantities because a lot of times if we're adding bike lanes, that means we're adding a lot of striping and some signage as well. So that'll increase the quantities. And so if we're adding bike lanes, that extra cost, there's an org within Public Works called Bike Implementation, where there's annual money available for these types of restriping projects to include bike lanes. So this is a list of projects that we already designed and are included in the 2023 pavement maintenance program. A lot of these are bike lane projects, which is really great. Blackhawk, for example, we're adding bike lanes and a striped median. So that's a project where we actually reduced the number of through lanes. And we did have already had a lot of traffic data to support that lane reduction as well. On Laredo, there's already bike lanes, but we actually decided to redesign them and stripe them a little bit wider and provide a better buffer area that delineates them more clearly. Del Mar Circle, adding bike lanes there as well. I think that work's being done any day now. And then another roadway that doesn't have bike lanes but had difference is Pure. Improvements to auxiliary lane striping that we could include. So we did a little bit of redesign on that as well. And then Sable, there's an additional bike lane that was added to the southbound direction, as well as other intersection striping improvements. So just wanted to give a couple examples of what these look like. So this is Blackhawk Street. This is just a snip of a little part of it from our plans. So the top part is our design plan that we created, and the bottom part is just an existing aerial. So you can see that it had 2 through lanes in each direction and a center 2-way left turn lane. And so we converted that to a buffered bike lane with the striping redesign. So the top graphic shows our plan for that. And then this next graphic shows our proposed plan in the top at Del Mar Circle. So there's another one where there's a lot of pavement width out there. It didn't necessarily have too much striping, but did have some striping. And so that's an area as well where we added bike lanes throughout most of Del Mar Circle and added some buffers as well, and had to tie into the signalized intersections, which those can be a little bit tough since sometimes we have to adjust signs and signal heads and things like that. So that is an overview of our plans for this year with the overlay program. But I also wanted to quickly touch on just bike lane projects in general that we sometimes do without the overlay program. So what the pavement maintenance program really gives us is that clean slate. So a roadway that already was striped is one that we really want to look at updating before it just gets restriped as it was before. But we have a lot of roadways in the city that are planned for, not a lot, but we have some roadways that are planned for bike lanes that don't have any striping on them at all. So this is a project that we completed a few years ago on 23rd Avenue in Northwest Aurora. So there were bike lanes already planned in this stretch of roadway, and there was no striping on the pavement before, just a wide stretch of roadway. So we went in and added some striped bike lanes in 2019 or 2020. So that's that project. And there's no benefit to adding this into like an overlay program since there's no striping to begin with. So then just touching on some next steps. So on a staff level, we're going to continue to review all of our pavement maintenance plans and see where we can recommend changes and design changes to the existing striping. And then another exciting thing that we have coming up is we are actually going to be updating the city's bicycle master plan as part of our upcoming multimodal transportation master plan. And we had a kickoff for that study last week, which is pretty exciting as well. So our bicycle master plan will be updated using a lot of different resident feedback, and that should really help inform and prioritize future bike lane projects. And that is all I had on this item. So any questions?
Thank you so much, Carly, for that presentation. I'll defer to my colleagues first. Councilmember Lawson.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Marcano. Carly, I have a question. So, and I'm trying to think, I go down this road every day, but you guys have the bicycle lanes on Smoky Hill, correct? There's a small, when you turn off of Tufts to the right.
Oh gosh, I didn't think there were bicycle lanes in Smoky Hill. Cindy, you drive that area a lot. Do you know?
I just think it was something there, or did you guys take those away? Because I thought that was very dangerous to even have those bike lanes there, and people still go on the sidewalks and bike.
Yep.
I just can't, I live over here, because I'm driving, but there were bicycle lanes on that, when you turn off of Tufts to go down Smoky Hill, and that's a very dangerous road. So,
So there were, and
okay.
they were about this wide,
Yeah, they're really
like
tiny.
a foot, and we
Okay.
took them out and we took the signs down
Okay,
probably
okay.
5 or 6 years ago.
Okay,
So
that might have been just
thought I
before me because
saw
it's not
it.
ringing a bell. We had a similar thing on Buckley as well, where it's the same like 4-lane, high traffic, high speed area, and it wasn't even a wide enough lane for a bike symbol to fit in it. So, and I
Can you
think that
guys
just
do something this summer? Because I could have sworn I saw a double lane that was, maybe you guys were taking it away, but people were still kind of using it as a bike lane.
I think there is, Carly, we should go visit
I
Buckley
think you need
again
to look
because
at that because
yeah.
if that is still
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
that's very dangerous. And I think I see it, but if people are using that Smoky Hill should be nowhere for a bike lane. I'm trying to be, I know we want our city to be mobile, but that particular road, definitely not. So,
Yeah.
I'll take a picture because I'll be coming out that way just to see if what I'm seeing, but I still think I see some double small lanes for something on that curve. So just wanted to bring that up. And how do you
Okay.
research that? Like for when you're putting this on Blackhawk, for example,
Mhm.
that's a pretty busy road as well. How will you evaluate that? Will you look at accident information? I mean, reporting information from people saying that it's not safe, and then maybe you'll have to redesign it or maybe not have it there at all. I guess that's what I'm kind of looking at or
Yeah,
asking a question about.
there's a lot of different things that we look at to decide what type of multimodal facilities to provide. So it's not always on street bike lanes.
Okay,
And we try to look at the volumes of traffic. We try to look at safety as their crash history, um, and number of through lanes, auxiliary lanes, how we can transition if it's on street, how we can transition the cyclists at intersections is really important too. So we do look at traffic volumes. Blackhawk was actually, the traffic volumes were not that high on Blackhawk, which is why we repurposed some of that through lane width. I think people were maybe driving a little faster as well, just because there are
Yeah.
2 through lanes and they can pass people. So we're hoping that with the bike lanes, that helps a little bit, but the actual volumes weren't that high. But to your
okay,
point, the city used to just try to install multimodal facilities by just putting in bike lanes on a lot of arterials. So we have some of that still. And we try to bring those off street now. If it's a 4-lane section, high volumes on an arterial, we're looking to have wider sidewalks that can be multi-use paths in general instead of having on-street bike lanes. So that's why we didn't restrict Peoria for bike lanes, for example.
okay. All
Yeah.
right, thank you for addressing my question.
Yep.
Yep, and great questions, Councilmember Lawson. I'll just editorialize a little bit on that, because you're absolutely right. I feel like Smoky Hill is really a traffic sewer at this point, and it's, or a stroad, as I affectionately call them. And yeah, I don't think that having bike lanes there makes any sense, just given the current use and configuration of that surface. It looks like on Google Earth, there's still a painted gutter, basically, there, but I don't see any kind of sharrows or bike symbols. So maybe that's still there.
And
I
we
don't
do
even know.
sometimes stripe edge lines, and we try to make the lanes feel a little narrower sometimes as well to guide
Mhm.
people. So it might not be a bike lane, but we'll definitely take a closer look at that.
Okay, my
Yeah.
apologies. I probably got it wrong. It just looks like it. And
Okay.
It's probably used to be.
Yeah,
So just
okay.
kind of left there. But yeah, and one thing I wanted to add that just for the record is that when we do add bike infrastructure, and typically that means more than just striping, but you actually see lower rates of accidents and fatalities for all users. So motorists, bicyclists, pedestrians. So, and that's something that's corroborated by the National Institutes of Health and a bunch of other sources nationwide. So, even though we have a traffic sewer today, that doesn't mean it needs to remain one into the future. But obviously, I agree with you. Like, it doesn't make sense to add bike lanes right next to where people are doing 60 plus, because it's a highway. I think you said it correctly earlier, Councilmember Lawson. So, all right, Councilmember Medina.
Nothing at this time. I kind of
Okay.
missed a lot of it trying to get in. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry about those tech issues. All right, and then so I wanted to ask about the bike master plan, and you answered half my question because I'm excited to hear that it is being updated as of yesterday. That's fantastic. When was it last revised? Is it that when you showed us that little splash screen, I was like,
Yeah.
oh man, we've got the All America City thing there, and that's the old city.
It was
still.
old. It's very old. We all recognize it's outdated. I think it was 2012. But Mac and
Okay.
Tom, if you're on and can correct me, it might have been 2010 to 2012-ish. So more than 10 years old. It's pretty old. We all recognize it needs to be updated.
2012 was the specific Chair Marcano, the specific bike and pedestrian master plan that the city had completed. And that will be actually part of our citywide multimodal transportation plan will
Fantastic.
will capture bike and pedestrian elements as well as transit.
Love to hear that. Thank you, Mac. And then I have a more specific question about Wesley in Ward 4. So that recently was resurfaced. And I noticed that at a certain point, and I can't recall exactly where it ends. I want to say it's maybe Elkhart. There is no striping at all on the surface. So given the what you've touched on in this presentation, is that part of the reason why we didn't restripe that area? So like there's parts of the neighborhood now that still have striping that weren't resurfaced. I guess their pavement conditions were better than the frankly really potholy area that did get redone. So thank you for that. But is that part of why that's not then restriped? Because we're maybe looking at reconfiguring some of the surface use there?
No, that actually is probably just our striping. So there's a prime contractor that goes through and does a lot of the pavement work, and then there's a subcontractor that does all the striping. And so they try to go through, they follow behind, but sometimes they're a little delayed. So I think that's just a delay with the subcontractor that's doing the striping. And then they have a different crew that does the thermoplastic markings as well. So you'll see the crosswalks are even more delayed than the long lines sometimes. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for that little bit of information.
Yep.
Appreciate it. And, you know, I guess my 2 cents while we're reworking the master plan, Harvard out, then up to Dillon and then on Wesley, like I think that area is all sharrows. And I don't consider that to be bike infrastructure. So if we could do something a little, you know, more dedicated there, I would very much appreciate it. And I'm sure my neighbors would as well. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for that presentation. That's all I have right now. I'm just very excited about the master plan and the bike master plan being reworked. So we're being incorporated into all that. So thank you.
Yep.
All righty. So moving on to 4B, it's our snow and ice control plan for 2023 and 2024. And looks like we've got Lynn presenting on this one. So Lynn, you've got the
So good afternoon. Give me a second while I figure out the share. It's always have a problem in WebEx. So
Yep.
there we go. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Chair Marcano and the rest of the committee for your time today. My name is Lynn Center. I'm the Deputy Director of Public Works in charge of operations, and part of what my job entails right now is snow removal, our favorite topic around here. And what I'm here to do today is to go over our 2023-2024 snow and ice control plan. Our mission in ops is to provide the best possible level of service for the public within our budgetary constraints, as we all have. So first, what I'd like to do is go into a little bit of history so you get an idea of what our snow has been like, our snowfalls have been like throughout the years. So we have records back to 1951, which is, yeah, quite a while ago. And you can see it varies quite a bit. Way over on the right-hand side of this graph is last year's snow totals, which was just about 26 inches. And then this graph shows our snow totals by month back to 2011. And what you'll see way over on the left-hand side was last year's. So we had our first snow in November, but oddly, we had no snow in February. So it was kind of a bizarre year for us in a lot of ways, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So by month, this is last year's snow accumulations compared to our historic average. And as you will see, February tends to be one of our more snowier months, and we got nothing last year. So just goes to show you can't predict anything with the weather. Moving on, which kind of makes our job exciting and frustrating at the same time. All right, this table is showing the historic data versus last year's data by category of storm. As you all know, and I'll go into a little bit later, our snow plan sets 4 different categories of snowstorm based loosely on the amount of snowfall that we get. So historically, we get 7 Cat 1s, 8 Cat 2s, 3 Cat 3s, and 1 or less. The average is like 0.5 per year for the Cat 4 snowstorms. And last year, you'll see we got a lot more than average of our Category 1 snowstorms and significantly less than our historic average of the other category snowstorms. This is our cost comparison from 2021, 2022 to 2022, 2023. We had about half as many snowstorms, so consequently, our cost is a little less than half, or a little more than half. So our total cost last year, including some contract services for some ice removal that we undertook in January, our total cost was about $1.3 million, which equates to about $3.28 per resident. Okay, this snow and ice plan. So we review our snow and ice plan annually. We make changes to our routes for new areas of growth, and we also take a look at our existing routes to see if any modifications are needed. This year, which is unusual, we actually made some changes to the body of the document more than just the routes. We took a little bit of a deeper dive this year to clean up some language and clarify some of the items that were in our snow plan. So our snow plan sets 4 route priorities, colored in our maps as red, blue, green, and yellow. These priorities are based loosely on our roadway classification. So our priority 1 are red routes, are our arterial roads. Priority 2 or blue routes are primarily our collector roads, the roads that are adjacent to schools and hospitals. Priority 3 are green routes. They are neighborhood or local streets that go through the neighborhood and will connect to arterial or collector streets. And then our priority 4 or yellow routes are the main collectors north and south, east and west, out in the east part of the area of the city. We also established 4 storm categories based loosely on snow accumulation. So category 1 is anything less than 2 inches. Category 2 is in that 2 to 6 range. Category 3 is 6 to 12 inches. And category 4 is anything over 12 inches. And I've shown here the number of storms that we've gotten in each category since 1994, and then the average, what the average number of storms per season. So as you will see, most of our snowstorms are in that category 1 and 2 range. So less than 6 inches. This is an example of our snow map, and you will see that the arterials are red, collectors are blues, and then those residential streets in green. Our objective with our plan is to provide movement and safe movement and passage for public service and emergency vehicles. We try to do as much as we can with the resources that we have for the storm conditions that we're getting. So we try to staff so that we can cover reds and blues of both category 1 and category 2 snowstorms. Okay. Oh, sorry, my computers are running a little slow. So changes to the maps for this year. We added almost 4 lane miles of priority 2, which would be those collector routes, and almost 9 miles of priority 3, which would be those residential collectors. And I've just shown here the route areas that are impacted. Mostly it's the northeast part of the city. Think Aurora Highlands, Murphy Creek. As those areas develop, we expect to see more expansion of our snow routes in these areas. So to accomplish all this, we partner with Parks, Rec, and Open Space and Aurora Water. If we get to a point in a snowstorm or a predicted snowstorm where we feel that's going to exceed our resources, we do have contracts in place where we can call up contractors to bring in snow removal equipment and operators to supplement our efforts. We haven't had to do that very often. Those usually are Category 4 storms. So things that are usually it's over 12 inches, but it could be dependent on the snowstorm. We use 2 different types of materials for our snow removal efforts. One is a solid that's on the left. It's a de-icing material, so it goes down after snow's already fallen. What it does is it helps break up the snowpack, so that when we come through with a plow, we're not trying to break up huge chunks of snow and ice. It's smaller chunks. And then on the right-hand side is our liquid anti-icer. And we put that down before the snow starts to fall. And where that helps us is when we come back through and plow, we can plow down to bare pavement instead of a sheet of ice. We don't plow down to bare pavement during a snowstorm. And we leave about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch on the roadway, and that keeps the chemicals in place working for us instead of running down the gutter. We have nearly 90 pieces of equipment through the 3 departments to deal with snow, ranging from, our typical snow plow that you see on the left-hand side of this graph or this slide, up to, our heavy-duty snow blowers and our heavy equipment and graders. Okay, summary of some of the changes. So we did add some blue and green routes. We didn't add any priority 1 routes. We added language to clarify our non-prioritized residential streets, because we've been getting a lot of questions about that. So we added some language about that. We added a section that specifically addressed extreme conditions. And these aren't necessarily just weather conditions. It could be other resource conditions. So for example, if all of a sudden we lost half of our trucks, or we lost more than half of our personnel, that would be covered under the extreme conditions section as well. And lastly, we added some language, not very specific, but language that indicates that the city has the ability to implement a program that would allow private entities to plow residential streets. That is to address the newly approved, what we call the snow IGA, that allows special districts and HOAs to plow residential streets within their boundaries after they've executed an IGA with the city to do that. So in summary, we have 870 lane miles of red, 366 of blue, 242 of green, and 40 of yellow for just under 1,520 lane miles, which is still a 2-lane blacktop that's 759 miles long. That gets us to about Columbia, Missouri. I think probably next year we're going to have to change the picture, because I think we'll be past Columbia at that point.
Oh my God.
All right. Also included in our snow and ice plan are some staffing guidelines. Again, no 2 snowstorms are alike. So where we might really need to staff, say 90 per shift, doesn't always have to apply to a Category 3. If we have really extreme weather conditions, high winds, extreme cold, we may need to go to 90 per shift in a Category 2 snowstorm. So this is a guideline, and it's our starting point for when we're doing our planning. Oh, and I have to put in a plug. APWA granted our snow and ice control plan a model practice designation for our last reaccreditation. So we're going through that again in 2024, and fingers crossed we'll get it again.
Great.
Some challenges that we're facing are staffing, just like we had last year. We are still down almost 40%, which is 28 positions in our operator and driver positions. Aurora Water still showing a 20% vacancy, and Pros is still in that 15 to 20% vacancy. So we're going to employ the same strategies that we did last year to help overcome and address some of these staffing shortages. One is to try to increase our seasonal workers, and we were actually able last year to add 2 seasonal workers for streets. These were employees who left streets They retired, but they still like to do snow. So they come back and they do snow for us. And they'll be back again this winter as well. Public Works will be calling in pros and Aurora Water for our lower category events. We try not to bother them until we get to that category 3. However, given our staffing shortages, we're going to be calling them probably for anything that's much more than 2 inches depth of snow. We're looking at finding ways to use non-CDL employees for some of the snow operations. That'll free up the CDL drivers to drive. Excuse me. And then we will be looking at contract some of the snow removal efforts into our down into our category 3 storms rather than looking at it only in the category 4 snowstorms. And then last year, pros initiated a snow removal contract for the fire stations that freed up some of their CDL drivers to help us out. And that contract is managed by Aurora Fire. OEM, APD, and Aurora Fire helped us out last year by developing rescue task forces that would respond to calls for stranded motorists. And they're working with fire to add some first aid and medical response or paramedic response to those task forces. This really helps us in that we're not pulling people off of our route to respond to those stranded motorists. APD has also stated that this will allow them to be that clear that path for fire if they have the capability. But then that also allows us to keep our drivers on route rather than taking them off route to respond. We will still do that, but this could be a really big help for us. This is just kind of showing the number of staff that we have, what we need per category storm, reiterates the fact that we'll need to rely on Aurora Water and pros to help us out when we get anything that's over about 2 inches. If we do get into that category 3 snowstorm and we're having trouble maintaining our red and blue routes, we will look at dropping the blue routes that don't service a hospital or a fire station. So those we consider our high priority 2 routes, and we will try always to maintain those. So everything that we've talked about here with as far as our challenges and how we're going to address them aligns with our proposed snow plan, and we don't really feel that any policy changes are needed at this point. So just as in summary, hit it again, Aurora Water, pros, and Public Works are experiencing unprecedented vacancies. So we'll be relying on them for things that are greater than 2 inches. As always, our routes are plowed in priority order, and they're taken off in reverse priority order. So if we're in the middle of a storm and it turns on us, we will drop our lower priority routes to make sure that we're always maintaining service to our priority 1 routes. Historically, most of our storms are less than 6 inches, and we don't really foresee any problem maintaining red and blue routes for our storms that are less than 6 inches. Larger than 6 inches, we may call on contracted drivers, and we may need to drop those priority 2 routes. Just all depends on the characteristics of the snowstorm.
Yep.
Okay. So moving on to how do we plan for a snowstorm? We use all of these tools. Some are free, like our local media, and some that we pay for. But we take into account all of this information because predicting weather, particularly in Colorado, is a little bit of a roll of the dice. And the more opinions you have, you're going to kind of get circling in onto what really might be happening. So we start our planning, 5 days into advance and really get it nailed down 12 hours before snow is predicted to start. And I would just say our local news and everything is great, but I would just take their weather predictions with a grain of salt. And we do put out, as we're doing our planning, we do put out notices about what our plan is and what we're seeing in the forecast to everyone. So please look at those. And if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to call. So this winter, everybody wants to know, what's this winter going to be like? I did actually consult the woolly caterpillars this year, and they were indecisive. Several resources, some parts of the country were showing very different than other parts of the country. But all the Farmer's Almanac, they're saying for this year is the burr is back. So we're looking at probably colder temps than last year for us, with our average snowfall, which we have not seen for a while. So it's going to seem like it's a pretty heavy winter for us, but it probably is going to be just about our average. And for once, I think National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, is kind of on the same page. They are both predicting an El Nino for at least the start of this year, which for us means pretty much about our historic norms, our average temps and our average snowfall. So just give you an idea of what they're predicting from November through January. As you can see, they're predicting a little bit warmer temperatures potentially, but about average snowfall. And then from December through February, we're looking at about average temperatures, which will probably be a little bit colder than we've seen in the past. And again, the same amount of snowfall, so our averages. So we're looking for a lot of snow in February and March, which is where we usually see most of our snowfall. That is the end of my presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
All righty. Thank you, Lynn, for the presentation. Councilmember Lawson, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, but thank you for the presentation, Lynn.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Lawson. Councilmember Medina?
Yes, just one question. After you plow, like the area that I'm talking about is on Mississippi heading east from Buckley to Uravan. Every time the plows come by there, that all snow gets pushed up onto the sidewalk. And I've seen that sidewalk basically have ice and snow for 4 months.
Yeah.
And so it's not clear for people to, traverse, and it's pretty high and it's slick. So I was just wondering, do we ever go back and, not plow those, but, get rid of the snow, shovel the snow off of those?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're not supposed to be pushing snow up onto the sidewalk. So I'm going to chalk that up to a lot of new operators. The snow is supposed to stay in the street, but if we are made aware of that situation, we actually kind of make the person who did it go out and shovel the sidewalk so that they get the message that they're not supposed to do that. So we try very hard not to. Sometimes, particularly in those really deep snowstorms, which we haven't had one, knock on wood, for a little bit, we might not have any choice but to do that. But if we're made aware of it, we will go out and clear it. We go through at the end of snowstorms and clean up our cleanup measures. So if we see snow that we've pushed onto the sidewalk, then we'll go back with smaller equipment to try to get it off the sidewalk, particularly if it's next to a fence or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Medina. And Lynn, I have a couple questions here.
Sure.
So first is going to start with a specific road in Ward 4 that I get a lot of complaints about every winter. And that is actually going to be Cimarron. So if you look at the map, I forget what page this is actually on I think it's S2. Yeah, it's map S2. You see that Heather Gardens Way and Marina Way are priority 2, which makes sense to me. A lot of people cut through there, especially to get out onto Parker through Vaughn. And then you see that Black Hawk and Abilene are priority 2 as well, but only priority 2 out. But then in between, a red route, which is Sable, and then Yale, you have Cimarron Street, which curves into Harvard, and then turns into Sable when you get to Iliff. And there's a lot of traffic on that one because it connects directly from Marina Drive. And I'm wondering why that's a green route. I feel like it should be blue to kind of match the same treatment that a lot of our other busy connectors are used. So could you
I'm trying to pull up the map.
Yeah, sorry.
You can bear with me for just a second. And one of the things we do is take a look at the routes every year. Excuse me, it's coming up where I don't want it to be. Yes. So maybe this is good. I'll just share. Okay, so you were discussing Cimarron. Is Cimarron
right there.
here?
Yep.
Right there. Okay.
Yeah, so I get a lot of
green
complaints
and
from the
not blue.
residents
Yeah,
because
I'm not sure. I think
Yeah.
that's something that we need to check it, and I'll make a note.
Okay, great. I think I brought this up last year, and that's the response that I got as well. So I'm going to keep pestering y'all.
It could be. Sometimes we have an issue with parking on the
Sure.
sides of the street. So I'm not. I am not sure. And I'm not sure why. I'll have to dig into our conversation, our notes and stuff to find out why it's still green. And I don't remember why. I have an answer for you on another street, but that one I don't know for sure.
Okay, cool. Well, I guess when y'all find that out, would it be possible to just
Yes.
email the committee with a quick update?
Yes.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, to Iliff Blue.
Second question I have for you is regarding vacancies that you shared with us. 40% is really high. So what are the current strategies to retain those positions aside from to fill those positions? Because contractors are going to be more expensive than just hiring internal FTEs. And I guess what success have you had, and what's the reason folks are leaving?
You know, we've had this vacancy rate for a couple of years now. And our operator pool within the city are very experienced, meaning they've been with the city for a long time. So a lot, probably I'd say about half of what we're seeing are people that are retiring. We also have people who are chasing the dollar.
Sure.
I will say we've had some of those people come back too. So a lot of it is exactly that. It could be the pay rate, but it could just be people that are retiring. As far as what we're doing is we're trying to advertise everywhere we possibly can. And I think Cindy was mentioning the other day that there are some job fair type opportunities coming up that Public Works will be in. And then I believe we were looking at a LinkedIn campaign that would get some of our positions out there through LinkedIn that might generate some more interest.
Yeah, and I can add to that. We're working with HR to do a marketing campaign on LinkedIn for our vacancies. And we do have career fairs that we're attending that are scheduled for next week. And we're looking for future opportunities for that as well. So, and I think with the compensation study that HR completed and has been implementing in some of our career progression, that is providing little bit better applicant pool. For instance, at South Satellite, we just hired 3 new people in the last month. So we're definitely working on it and gonna hit it from all cylinders, but it is definitely a challenging situation.
And it takes a certain talents and skills to want to do this work.
Yeah.
So you know, some people will hire them and they'll decide that's really not for them. So it's a challenge, and we're addressing it the best that we can for now. I'm hoping that it'll turn around a little bit. But we're seeing this across all of the trades and labor industries right now. So.
No, I get that. And I guess I just want to focus in on the pay real quick. What's the delta between what we're offering on average and what the market's offering on average for comparable work and experience?
I do not know that. Cindy, have you seen anything recent? I don't.
I have
Sorry, I
not,
wasn't
but
prepared for that.
they did do the market research to make us more comparable with the other agencies around, but I can definitely reach out to HR and get a little bit more detail. I don't know the delta off the top of my head, but we are much more competitive now than we were even 2
Absolutely.
years ago.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to hear that, but my concern is always going to go back to, well, are we competitive enough? So yeah, because I don't like that public sector often pays less than private sector because it makes it difficult for us to attract and retain talent. So that never has really made sense to me. But anyway, just throwing that out there. So yeah, if we can get, I guess, an update on that, whether it's through email or maybe just like at our next meeting, I'd like to know a little more about that. All right, and then my final question is, and some Councilor Medina actually touched on a bit of this with the snow getting pushed up onto sidewalks, snow getting pushed onto bus stops. That's a big damn problem for our residents, especially folks who are elderly and disabled. I get complaints about this annually, especially along the Denver-Aurora border over on Dayton, where we have RTD stops there. So I guess, what are we able to do for these folks? I'm glad to hear that if people are blocking sidewalks, you'll call the drivers back out and have them shovel it. But what about the bus stops? And I'll just preface this with, I know that the bus stop maintenance responsibilities sometimes fall to ad agencies. That is also not working for us because they let these places go to pot. They let the trash cans get full. They sometimes let they just remove the trash cans instead of servicing them, so that the bus stops are just vectors for litter. And I think that they do the same kind of thing with the snow. And maybe this just goes back to previous councils thought that an ad agency can also then become a pseudo public works entity. I don't think that's working out for us. But yeah, I'm not saying that to like pile onto y'all, but what's the plan to make sure that everyone can still access bus stops during after snow events, during and after?
Well, our and Cindy, chime in, please. But our operating philosophy is, if we've caused the problem, we're going to go out and fix it. Sometimes, however, it isn't us. They just snowed in, and that is the responsibility of whoever owns or has the license for that bus stop, be it RTD or an outdoor advertising or whoever it is right now. And so really all that we usually do is just call them. However, if we start getting a number of calls in, we'll go out and do what we can. But we just don't have the resources to be that primary service provider for that. But we certainly, particularly if it's becoming a safety issue, we will go out and make it safe.
Okay.
Councilmember Marcano, I can chime in here.
Go ahead, Laura.
So we recently, as of last week, had a conversation with RTD just about this issue on maintenance on bus stops. Certainly snow removal, trash, all of that falls into that category. And we're going to have some further meetings with them. They are also on their own going to be doing work around bus stops, particularly around ADA. And so we will be part of those conversations. And then separately, we're doing work internally. And our hope is to clarify and codify rules and responsibilities around our bus stops to ensure they're safe and well maintained.
Okay.
I'm happy to hear that. Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Just kind of, so with that being said, it just brings up a question to me. I know a lot of our constituents, they report these type of things to the council members, either to the ward at large. But do you guys have something where someone can actually maybe call or say, hey, is that still Access Aurora?
Yes.
And are you getting that information from Access Aurora to make sure that we're addressing some of these issues?
Yes,
Because
and yes.
obviously the reason someone's calling a council member is because maybe they submitted a ticket, but then it's not getting to the appropriate department. So I guess I'm just kind of wondering, how is that where people are calling to report? Is that where they should report this?
We would prefer that because we have a very small admin staff for streets, and we can very easily and quickly get overwhelmed with phone calls. It is best if people use the Access Aurora app or call into Access Aurora. We get those calls very, very quickly. We do prioritize them though. So we're going to prioritize safety over a convenience request, if you will. And 40% vacancy. So we try to get to them as quickly as we can, but particularly if we are still clearing snow from the roadway, it may take us a while to get to some of those calls that come in to actually be able to do something.
But I would assume though, if someone has called and someone has fallen, regardless if it's RTD us, we could be liable because of a non-response. Is that correct?
Right.
If it's a safety issue.
Right. But if we've gotten a call and someone has says, you know, I fell or someone else falls, that bumps that call up to the top of the list. So as soon as we get it, we try to get somebody out there to take care of it.
All right. So thank you for the question, Councilmember Lawson. And thank you for the follow-up there. So yeah, and I guess I'll close on that question as well with, I understand it's not currently our responsibility to maintain these stops, but our residents, quite frankly, don't care, and really nor should they. They need access to these services. So you know, I know this is a broader conversation that we need to have with RTD, because I think that there needs to be a stronger partnership there. I think that we should stop relying on private advertising agencies to do something that they're not really set up to do. And that's the direction I'd like to have some of these maintenance conversations go, and maybe we can figure out the funding for that. And of course, I don't want to charge y'all with an unfunded mandate, right? Because I know the city has been run very lean and mean for a long time, so I don't want to like overburden our staff and contribute to those burnout issues. But yeah, it's just something that, you know, is something that's a serious issue for a lot of our residents. And I just want to make sure that y'all are keenly aware of that and that we're doing what we can to make that as painless as possible in the interim.
Yeah. Right. I think I would say it's important to Public Works too.
Yes.
We have pride in the city, and that's how we want to function. So, yep.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, Len, for the presentation on that. And I look forward to hearing back from you on Cimarron.
I will check into it. Thank you.
All righty. Great. All right. Next on our agenda is 4C, an IGA for, and this has a long title, for Arapahoe County Transit and Micromobility Study. Yay. All right. And Tom, I think you've got the floor for this one. Tom, we can see your presentation, but we can't hear you if you're speaking. Is that just me? Okay. Okay. I see Councilmember Lawson shaking her head too. Okay.
Okay. When I go to share, WebEx looks very, very different. So.
Yeah. All right. We can hear you now, though, Tom.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to turn on my video to complicate things.
That's fine.
Yeah. Thank you. This is. Yeah. This IGA is with. Okay. Other meetings. Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember Marcano. Like you said, Tom Worker Braddock, Senior Transportation Planner here with the city. This IGA is with Arapahoe County for a countywide transit and micromobility study. The project was shared with TABS in October 2022 when the grant was awarded to Arapahoe County. We now need to sign an IGA to move into the actual contract and project phase. The focus of the study will be evaluating opportunities and needs for transit services within the urbanized area of Arapahoe County, with focus on how to complete commuter trips and where people are coming from or going to. This will also look at the potential for microtransit and micromobility, such as bike share, scooter share, or forms of microtransit, as well as which first or last mile connections need to be addressed. Recommendations resulting from the study will be tiered in short-term, medium-term, or long-term recommendations. Over 60% of the project is being reserved for implementing a pilot project in the study's second phase. That pilot project will involve going out for a second RFP, but is included in this IGA. In addition, this project will be done with coordination and input from RTD's Sub-Regional Service Council. We see the result of the study informing future transit efforts, including future examinations of RTD's network in this area, as well as future updates to our own transportation master plan, which, as this committee knows, is just getting kicked off now. These are the project partners in the study that are financially contributing based on a population and employment share. These are a mix of both local cities as well as transportation management associations that are tasked with providing additional choices and encouragement to commuters in ways of getting to work besides driving alone. Project has $1.455 million in total funding with a 90-10 federal-local split. Aurora's contributing $40,000, and the contributions from the other partners are also shown on the slide. So with that, does the committee support moving this IGA to the next available council study session?
Thank you, Tom, for the brief presentation. Councilmember Lawson?
I approve it moving forward.
All right, Councilmember Medina?
I approve as well.
Same as well. Very excited about this. Thank you, Tom.
Great, thank you.
Yep. And finally on our agenda for today, we have 4D, local street sections, and we're going to hand this one over to Haley Johansson. So Haley, you've got the floor.
Hi there. I'm going to go ahead and figure out how to share here for just a second. Is that coming up?
There is.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Marcano and council members Lawson and Medina. My name is Haley Johansson, and I'm the city engineer for City of Aurora, of course. This presentation is as informational only, and it's to go over the local street sections and the criteria for the city. And this was requested by Chair Marcano, I think, at a previous TAPS meeting to go over this. And Carly will be assisting with part of this presentation as well. So today we're going to review the local street sections, both the past and the present. We're also going to talk about how the street sections are developed. Additionally, we're going to talk about street section width and the speeds that are associated with them. And we're going to talk about how the street sections are implemented for current and future developments, as well as what they look like in our existing developments and some of the retrofit projects that we have to address or mitigate speeding concerns. And then we will also have a discussion around the considerations for the existing parts of Aurora that have wider street sections and what we need to consider when we're looking to reduce those street sections. And then we'll also talk about next steps for existing developments and some other initiatives that the city and teams are working on. So the background, and I'm going to talk about the present day.
Haley, can I interrupt you just for a sec?
Sorry?
I'm just going to interrupt you just for a sec, because your presentation, while it is full screen, it has a border still, so it's not as large as it could be.
Okay, I could try and switch. Bear with me for just a second.
Yeah, is that just a me problem, or is everyone else seeing it a little small?
I doubt it's a you problem.
Yeah.
But I thank you for saying something.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Let's see if I can get this to work. Can you see?
I see your, there we go. All right.
Okay. One more moment while I try and figure out my end. Okay. Okay, here we go. So For the local street sections, these are defined in the city's roadway design and construction specifications. Since 1999, and as well as the current section that we're using, it's a 34-foot wide section, flow line to flow line. And so when you look at basically it's curb to curb, but we typically call it flow line to flow line. That's the section where there's the travel ways. There's 2 10-foot travel ways, and then 2 side parallel parking areas that are 7 feet each on both sides. The section also includes a curbside landscaping area and has a 5.5 detached sidewalk. And that's for you can see it up on the upper right here on the local type 1. That is the primary local street section that we use for residential applications. There are 2 other types of local street sections. The second one that we typically use in residential areas is the type 2 that has a slightly reduced traveled way and but continues to have that 7-foot parking on both sides. The third type of local street section, we call it a type 3, and that is typically reserved for industrial and commercial areas. And so since this presentation is generally focused on residential areas, we'll focus on that type 1. One thing to note is that our local street section at that 34-foot width is consistent with other metro area municipalities. Along with our type 2, the 30-foot is also consistent. So generally in that range area. Our older neighborhoods prior to 1999, those street sections, curb line to curb, vary depending on when they were built. And I don't know if anyone would be as excited as I am to go back into our roadway manual from 1972. I found that those street sections could be anywhere from 36 to 40 feet wide. And that's consistent if you look and do a little bit of Google measuring. Those are consistent with what's been implemented in those existing areas. So a bit wider than what we have proposed now. They still have the same configuration. It's implied that there's 2 travel lanes in each, 1 travel lane in each direction, and then parking along each side. And our local street sections typically don't have striping on them. The width can contribute to some speeding depending on the street and the context of the particular area. It also, you could tell there's different connectivity for different areas of the city as well. Original Aurora has a little bit of a different grid type system than some of the other areas of existing Aurora as well. So those can contribute in terms of context of speeding. And then the other contributor is how utilized the parking is along those streets. So if you don't have a lot of cars parking along the side, then it feels like a very wide open road. So the street sections and the width are developed using or considering a number of different things. We're looking at, the physical characteristics of vehicles and movements, and I'm talking more about the flow line to flow line right now. But the physical characteristics of the vehicles, the movements of those vehicles, and the parking. On the right here, this is a turning template that shows a passenger vehicle as well as a delivery type vehicle. So it's a single unit box truck type vehicle. And we want to take into consideration those turning movements at the intersections, and that does inform the width of the roads as well. The other considerations that we take into account are fire trucks, buses for schools, and larger trucks as well. But generally the design is based around the fire trucks and kind of those delivery vehicles. For the turning movements for in an intersection like this and how we kind of figure out how wide the roads need to be. The single unit kind of delivery vehicle is the vehicle that we need to make sure can make that turning movement without encroaching into the oncoming lane. So if you have someone driving up to, say a stop sign, you don't want to have a vehicle that is forced to make that wide turn on a regular basis. The exception to that rule is emergency vehicles. So if you think about your fire truck, those are allowed to encroach into the approaching lane or the oncoming lane. And the reason for that is that they're responding to an emergency and likely have their lights and sirens on anyway. A couple of other things associated with how we determine the width of the street section. They can be used for snow storage areas, especially on the locals there. And then we want to have these defined so that they provide some consistency for the traveling public. They don't find a variety of roads that they have to navigate. And then it also sets a baseline for our city standards that our development community can use. And the other item I'll just note is that our local speed limits are 25 miles per hour on locals. And that's, unless Carly wants to correct me, I think that's defined in city code. So then to talk about the street sections, this I think was used in a previous presentation regarding speeding in street sections. The Newcastle example on the left-hand side, that's a typical 34-foot wide local roadway. That's what we're using now. That's our current and future development width. And then you can see the speeds increase on the wider roads that are used in existing areas of development. So I'm going to speak a bit about the future developments. So right now, we're talking about the width of the section. Our current local roadway width and is being utilized in those future developments, and is narrower than the original and existing Aurora that's been developed from the 70s and 80s. And then the other component that we have when we're reviewing our developments that come in for design is encouraging the use of traffic calming. And so Carly on her team has traffic reviewers that will look at the proposed developments coming through and recommend using traffic calming in the future developments, and include those in the design so that they're within the development right at the outset of construction. And some of those devices include the mini or compact roundabouts, striping the roadways so that there's narrower lane widths. We also can incorporate improved pedestrian crossings and using the flashing signs, or also having curb extensions to reduce the amount of time that a pedestrian would be in the travel way at those intersections and at mid-block. So those are some of the things that we're using for future development. And then I'm gonna, oh, that's fun. I didn't realize we had a graphic change here.
This was my fault. I got fancy with a PowerPoint a while ago, and now when we copy it over, everything flies all over the place. So sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. If you can probably click a couple times on this one. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for the heads up.
I won't use any of those settings. Yeah.
Took me by surprise. I'm gonna turn this one over to Carly anyway now, so she can talk about the existing developments and what we do for those.
Thanks, Haley. So there's a few slides where we talk about how to retrofit and what we currently do with existing developments and areas that are already built out. Because as Haley mentioned, a lot of our newer standards do take into account some of our kind of lessons learned and have new details, but a lot of what we receive complaints and concerns about from residents is in our existing areas and existing neighborhoods. So one program that we have to address speeding concerns is our neighborhood traffic calming program. And I won't spend too much time on this because I know you all are very familiar. It's been a popular program. We rolled it out in 2019, and it's a resident kind of driven application process. And residents can apply for permanent speed mitigation measures on local and collector roadways. And these are just some pictures of some of the devices that we install through that program. So definitely lots of speed cushions, radar signs, a few mini roundabouts, various pedestrian crossings, and different types of treatments. So that's one thing that we have as a tool for existing developments. And if you could go to the next slide, Haley. I don't think I made anything fly on this slide. we should be good now. So other options and considerations we have for some of our existing neighborhoods are, first of all, there's different intersection treatments that we have. So Haley showed a previous graphic of like a bulb out or curb extension, which is really focuses on narrowing the width, but only focused at intersections to reduce the travel width for pedestrians and make folks feel like the roadway is slower and slow them down a bit. And we do have a detail for that in our roadway manual. So we have a couple funded projects already using grant funds in Northwest Aurora, where we tried to focus those projects around locations with a crash history. So we have those types of projects. It is possible to reduce the street width by moving the curb and gutter. Those types of projects where we're physically changing the roadway have a lot of different considerations that we need to take into account with those types of designs. So first, just because of a lot of different constraints in these existing neighborhoods, one of the big considerations is cost. Just for example, if we were to go widen a sidewalk on both sides of a street on a local neighborhood for 1 mile, the cost would probably be about $4 to $5 million. So that's a pretty significant cost for not that long of a stretch. And that's kind of what we've learned with a few of our recently completed sidewalk projects. Just the bids we're getting on all construction projects lately have escalated a lot in the last few years. And even just a simple sidewalk widening project has become really expensive. Another consideration is that we don't want to narrow the roadway width so much that we're impacting bus routes, emergency response, snow plowing, school access, those types of things. So that also goes into play when we're looking at new projects and even some, I guess, new projects in existing neighborhoods, but then new projects overall as well. We're clear to run turning templates if anything's non-standard. And then there's just a lot of different constructability related impacts when you're looking at a project in an existing neighborhood. A lot of times if the neighborhood has existed since, for 50 years, people have assumed that the area right behind the sidewalk is all their property. They don't fully understand where right of way is. Some people build like very elaborate like fences, have different landscaping features. Sometimes there's mature trees that have been there for decades and decades. And then there's other impacts to consider to utility lines. So whenever especially if we're widening into the road, a lot of times there's utility impacts, but even if we're just widening a sidewalk and keeping the curb and gutter where it is and widening the sidewalk, there's still impacts to fire hydrants, water meters, sprinkler systems, all sorts of things. And that really just makes these projects that seem simple on the face of it be a little more complicated. And another thing to keep in mind is just when we're widening sidewalks or when we're modifying a lane section, it's difficult sometimes to tie into the existing slopes. So whether that be the crown of the road having impacts to how we can design it, or if we're widening the sidewalk in one of our existing neighborhoods and we need to bring the sidewalk back at a relatively flat grade at 2%, a lot of times that means we're going to need to tie into other things on private property. We might need easements, and it's just a very long and expensive process that impacts our residents. So those are some considerations to change roadway sections for our existing areas. And if you could go to the next slide, please. So here are a few examples of projects that we already have and have either constructed very recently or that we have in design. So first, we recently completed a project where we widened a sidewalk on 25th Avenue in Northwest Aurora to create a pedestrian boulevard. And this project was a recommendation in a previous planning study for the Northwest Aurora mobility study. And so we didn't widen it to just our standard width. We went further and made it a pedestrian boulevard on the north side. We also reduced the overall roadway width. So we did widen into the road in this case. The project was about $1.5 million and was only about 1/3 of a mile. Part of that extra cost, though, was because of the grant funding and clearances and extra approvals needed as far as that process. And then another project we finished, or we're still finishing, but it's almost completed recently, which Chair Marcano, I know you're really familiar with this one, but the Lima Street project, we widened a sidewalk on one side of the road for half a mile. That project was over $1 million for construction. If we were on that project, we just removed the curb and gutter, replaced it where it was, and widened back. If our cost estimates for widening into the road on that one would have actually just about doubled the project cost. And then, there were all sorts of different constraints to work around with that project, with trees, utilities, street lights, all sorts of different things with that project. But that's one example of a recent retrofit project. And then the next projects on this list are still in design or have recently completed design. So Yale and Peoria sidewalk projects, Montview Boulevard has been designed as well. And then we do have a curb extension or bulb out project in Northwest Aurora that's also grant funded. That one, we're also looking at some more inexpensive alternatives using paint and posts instead of fully moving all the curbs, to try to address more intersections and just see how those work. So that's the bulb out project that we have as a additional retrofit project. And if you could go to the next slide, Haley.
Yeah, I'll just chime in real quick though. I was able to get some numbers on the Peoria and Yale sidewalk project, and that one was about 1,500 linear feet and was 308,000 to complete. And then the Montview project is about 1 mile, and that is 29 million.
The Montview project does include roadway widening as well, though, I'll add in. So it's not just sidewalk. There's a lot of different improvements in that project.
Yeah.
It's a very multimodal project along Montview.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Haley. Go to the next. Oh, is this the next slide? Yes. Okay, so just wanted to go over just a recap and then some of our next steps as well. So just circling back, so our local street sections that we have now that are being installed in the newer areas of the city are a lot different than what is installed in the core area of the city in the pre-2000s developments. So our roadway widths now are a lot narrower in general, and I think that does help fundamentally with some of the speed concern issues that we've had. Another thing is that our sidewalks now are primarily detached, which I think helps a lot for people feeling like they're further away from the road and pedestrian safety as well. And we are also moving forward with our traffic calming program to address some of the existing areas in the city. So that's an ongoing program. Council has been great at providing annual funding for that program. So we're still accepting applications and definitely direct residents over there. And then I feel like we mentioned this in every presentation, so it's my time to mention the multimodal transportation master plan project, which is a big planning level project that we're, again, very excited about. And the scope of this project actually includes reviewing our existing city standards and making recommendations for adjustments to existing standards. So we'll definitely be getting some extensive public feedback, which will inform some future updates to our city standards. And then Haley is proceeding annually with updating our roadway design and construction manual with various changes and lessons learned. So we're going through that process right now, and we'll probably have a new roadway manual updated early next year. And then to get some of these retrofit projects funded, since they're also so expensive and really take a lot of resources to get done, we've been actively pursuing different grant projects. And I know we've talked about those previously, but we've been pretty successful at getting design and construction funding for a lot of different multimodal projects as well. And I think that is all we have before we open it up for questions. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for the presentation. I have a bunch of questions here, but we also have about 6 minutes left. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I'm just going to let Councilmember Lawson go first here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Councilmember Marcano. I just have one question. Carly, so I don't know if this is applicable or not, but for example, this is a major case, I guess, in where there's a lot of street parking, particularly in Ward 1. So people where they park their cars up to a stop sign, because a lot of that's stop sign oriented, it's blind spots. So does the city, are those, where you guys place those stop signs based on where people are parking? And sometimes people park up to where the stop sign is. So you've been in Ward 1, and I'm just using that as an example. It's in some other parts of the city where the cars, people are doing, parking along the road. it's very hard to see because you got cars here, but you have to do the stop sign. You have to do a four-way stop. So does the city look into that, or is that a federal, or is that a state? I just don't know about where we place stop signs.
Yes, that's a good question. So we try to place stop signs as close to the intersection where we can. They're normally at the point where the radius starts to curve around the corner. But we also try to avoid trees when we're doing that. We don't want to put a stop sign in an area we think it's ideal if it's right behind a tree or something like that. So people have to stop at stop signs, but it doesn't have to be completely exact. We just want to make sure they're visible. So they are mounted at a 7-foot mounting height in general, which I think helps a bit as long as it's not a really large vehicle. But I'm actually going to see if Scott has more to add on this as well. So Scott, I think it's part of,
Can I
go
just
ahead.
make another point?
Yeah.
So it is blind depending because of cars. And I've been in this situation where you're kind of taking a chance to cross. You're stopping, but because it's kind of a blind, the area is dense. So stop signs where people are parked at, depending on the vehicles, sometimes there's big vehicles there that kind of hide the sign. So people, you're kind of going like, you're kind of edging out, but then there's another car here and another car here. So a lot of you're kind of dashing sometimes and just hoping that you don't get hit. I guess it's a concern because people do park way up there depending on the height of vehicles. It's really hard to see. And it does, to me, it's a public safety issue. So, and in dense areas, I guess I'm just wondering, is there something that can be done in future developments that we make dense? Or can there be in areas, or do you have to look at traffic data, or if there has to be crashes there? I mean, there's a lot of places in Ward 1 in particular where you are dashing and taking a chance because you can't see, you got to put your car out there.
Yeah, I think everything we do has a trade-off, right? So we
Okay.
don't want to just globally restrict all parking, but we do want to make sure people can see stop signs. So sometimes what we do, especially in Ward 1, is if there's a stop sign posted on the right side where you're used to seeing it, sometimes we'll also post it on the opposing side of the intersection if there's a visibility issue. If we get any sort of complaint or concern, someone in my group generally goes out and sees if they can see the stop sign, if it's visible. Can we move it? Can a tree be trimmed? Or sometimes we do restrict parking based on site distance. We try not to jump to that because a lot of these areas parking is really needed and we don't want to put more work on Park Aurora either. But what I was going to say also is that I think it's per city code, you can't park within a certain distance of an intersection. I know people do, but it's in code, so it doesn't always have to necessarily be signed. We try to only use parking signs to restrict when we need to. And Cindy has her hand up. So go ahead, Cindy.
Yeah, I was just going to say Scott Bauman's on, our parking and mobility manager, and I think he could answer the question about the distance from the sidewalk or from the stop sign.
The intersection, yeah.
Intersection. Thank you. Scott?
Hi, it's Scott Bauman, Park Aurora. Hey, I investigate all these type of conditions all the time, these modifications to the existing curb lane, stuff like that. So current ordinance is 15 feet from the stop sign. Not every stop sign has a no parking sign, preceding it. So if there are conditions by which there are a lot of cars parked in the road and they're parking too close to a stop sign and it's an unsafe condition, I investigate that all the time. So I encourage those folks just to, put in an access or ticket. I'm happy to investigate it. I look at it and in some, I at least, almost in all cases put up a no parking sign like here in the corner. Sometimes it's at 15 feet. Sometimes it's greater. Sometimes I take it to 20, 25. I've taken it to 45 feet, stuff like that, depending on the condition. So I look at, how packed the existing street is, because you got to be sensitive to the needs of, the parking accommodations of what's needed for residents and so forth. But, I'm looking at, turning radiuses. I'm looking at, the site triangles, the turning and all that stuff. So I examine and investigate all that. And I, at least put in that 15 feet, but it's really oftentimes it's at 20, 25 feet. Every intersection is unique and different based on the environmental conditions. So I'm addressing those needs as they come across my desk. I do it every day.
And then Councilmember Marcano, just a quick question. I know we're running out of time. So that's great to know that you're doing that. I can give you one intersection down by Paris or the former Paris Elementary School. when you come out of that school and if you try to make a left or right, it's because I understand the need for parking. I really do. Sometimes these are high profile, higher vehicles or vans. And I know people have to park where they're parked, but that right there, that intersection, do you know where I'm talking about? When you're coming out the school, you can go left or right. That's a very, 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 you're taking a chance.
Yeah, I'm happy to look
And
at it.
I'm
There's
being
a
very
lot of
honest because some people are parking around the curb right there. So you gotta, I'm just giving you some examples of how my experience is. Maybe I should do an Access Aurora ticket, but just to let you know that I understand the need for parking, but there also the need for people who have their vehicles. And if we get hit and people even in the neighborhood, then that means their vehicle they don't have a vehicle.
Exactly.
So I just think that we should look at that a little bit more, but that's just my opinion. And thank you for addressing the question.
Yeah, I look at those conditions all the time, and sometimes there's, people park a big van there. Sometimes I can't do anything. Sometimes there's a HOA type neighborhood fence that's right up against the sidewalk. You can't see. I mean, there's a lot of environmental factors that I got to factor in, and sometimes I can help. Anytime I can, sometimes I can. There are trees and existing signage, stuff like that. So I do my best, and I'm out there doing surveys and looking at it, and said I'm constantly putting in work orders to install and modify interstate, the curb lane all over the place. So just encourage your residents to put in a access for a ticket, and happy to look for it.
Yeah, just on that note, I know that South Sable onto Iliff, not a residential street, but it's one of those really dangerous turns where you can't really see traffic coming westward on Iliff. And I've seen some wrecks there. They're not pretty. So
noted.
Yep. And I also wanted to add that I think in residential areas like Councilmember Lawson was discussing, it's one of the beauties of the bulb outs to both reduce crossing widths for folks, and then also it forces folks to park further back from the stop signs. So you keep the intersections clear in terms of visibility and stuff. All right, great questions, and thank you for the conversation there. Councilmember Medina?
Nothing for me, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. So real quick, since we're a little over time here. So first I wanted to ask about elevated crossings when we're looking at those four-way intersections. I noticed those weren't really talked about in our manual. Is that something that we're considering? I've had residents, especially residents with disabilities, ask for those.
Yes, that's a great question. We actually have those included in the design on Montview, which I think will help a lot. And then on 13th Avenue, we received TIP grant funding for that project as well to widen sidewalks, and we're including them in that project as well. Where they become difficult is just areas that have drainage issues, or areas that are key snowplow routes, the red routes that Lynn was talking about. We don't want to put anything raised on those types of routes. So they're not always as simple to install as like a retrofit, but it's definitely something that we're hoping to use more in the future.
Okay, I'm happy to hear that. And I guess just for my information for the public's, the drainage slopes on those, you want to drain off of the improvement, right? So
yeah, we want to drain off
the street. You don't want to like drain into the center of it or anything like that.
Right. We want to drain off of those, but it really, so our speed cushions don't impact drainage because the gutter is totally clear. And those, the goal is for them to pretty much be level with the sidewalk. And so especially around corners, those can be really difficult if you don't already have an inlet or something. And I'll stop talking about water stuff because I'm going to be wrong really quickly if I get into any more detail than this. But they can be complicated. Okay.
Make the wet stuff go away. So understood. All right, and then so thank you. I'm excited to hear that. So, and I guess one of the questions that I had earlier, but I think y'all kind of addressed it, is that for new developments, we are kind of trending towards local type 2.
That's correct.
Okay, good. Because I was going to ask, well, why aren't we using that one? Good. And I saw some of the examples were actually slightly narrower than that, so good. Let me see here. So I guess, oh yeah, chicanes. How effective are they really? Because that's, I know that that's part of our toolbox, but I haven't really seen them outside of like that stretch in Ward 6 that we use as a stock photo almost at this point. Can you talk about this?
We've only really installed them on Ponderosa, which is the Ward 6 location you're referring to. I'd have to look at the before after date on that. I haven't looked at it in a while. A lot of times they're hard to design with our traffic calming program because they don't work well in between driveways and on like standard sections. So on Ponderosa, it was kind of special since there are driveways, but it's also more of like a rural road section. But we are looking into, and we have a detail in our traffic calming toolbox for them, and we're looking into incorporating them in some new developments, especially if we see a long, straighter section of roadway that we know will be a future complaint area that's too straight, too long or something. We're definitely looking into having more of those installed with new development, but we haven't done a whole lot of them lately. I think just because it doesn't fit the character of a lot of the roads we're getting complaints about. So.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good explanation. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Chair,
I guess, oh, sorry.
Chairman Marcano, can I just, I wanted to clarify, because I think you asked if we were using the local type 2s in we're using the local type 1 primarily in our residential areas, and we do use our local type 2s as well. The local type 1s give a bit better capacity for the network, and it kind of depends on what the context of those developments are, but we do use the local type 2s when they're more of a destination for a number of homes as opposed to a through grid connection type. So my apologies. We use primarily the local type 1.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. I find that honestly a little disappointing to hear because, you know, our own data seems to show that the wider roads, you have higher speeds, and those are, you know, marginally still, but still wider than type 2. And, you know, just from my perspective, if I had kids in a neighborhood, I don't want them to, you know, I want them to be dealing with as slow traffic as possible in there. And I've also seen some really gorgeous developments in the US and around the world that are using much narrower roads than we have here. So they still accommodate vehicular traffic, but like it's at speeds that, you know, aren't going to kill a kid if they hit them basically. So, or frankly, reduce the odds of getting hit to begin with. So yeah, is that something that we would maybe reconsider?
If I could, I think that, Chair Marcano, that would come out of our multimodal transportation study as well, to look at the best opportunities and the best sections to implement. So that would be part of the multimodal transportation study, and then we would put those considerations into the roadway manual as well through the updates.
Appreciate that, Cindy. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And then the last thing, I think I'll follow up with you guys offline about this, but I just want it on the record. So I actually did walk the Lima project yesterday with Valerie, and I'm really confused by a lot of what I saw in terms of like the width. It jogs so much, and I already know that we're going to have those light posts relocated. I don't really understand why that wasn't done ahead of time. But it is what it is. But yeah, I guess I want to know more about some of the design decisions that we made there. And I understand the cost is really high, and like that actually is giving me some serious heartburn now for how much we spent on that when it had a lot of imperfections in it. So I kind of want to tie that into a conversation maybe about what does it look like to bring some of the skills and equipment that are used to do these kinds of larger public works projects internally. Because I know we contract out for most of this stuff, and then we get hit with the public sector markup. Because like I know that, you know, inflation is real, the increased cost of labor is real, and building materials and all that. But my God, I'm having a hard time swallowing these numbers. Like this is so much money for really not that much work. So I want to.
That was mostly construction. Yeah, we could definitely talk about that project, but that money was mostly construction money, and then we also had to pay a lot of money to get easements for that project. So you do see a couple areas specifically necked down, and that's because there are two property owners that would not give us any sort of temporary easements at all. And those were constraints that I actually had talked through with Ms. Esposito before we finished the project and put it out to bid. So I think seeing it was different for her than my explanation probably, but there were some property owners that wouldn't give us any sort of easements to tie in at all. So
yeah. Because no, as we were walking, I took a bunch of photos and I compared it to what our GIS shows in terms of where our public rights of way are. And it seems like in some of those areas, we just didn't use the right of way. So I guess I want to know more about how the easement process here works. Because I thought if it's in our right of way, we have the rights to utilize it, period, full stop. So maybe I need some more education on that. And frankly, we probably need to educate the public on this as well.
We can go over that in detail. Yep.
Yeah, I would appreciate that because I know that this is going to impact, well, not this specific project, but you know, this kind of ties back into the 5G and 4G like towers that we have now, you know, being put up throughout the city. And folks, you know, are shocked to learn that they don't actually own their entire front yard, right?
Yeah.
Or that other folks have the affirmative right to utilize that. So I think we need a broader public education campaign on this, but also I think it would benefit council because this issue isn't going to go away, and especially as we start retrofitting existing infrastructure to be compliant with ADA. So, all right. And I'll follow up with you on the specifics, Carly.
Okay,
So,
sounds great.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. There was a lot, and we have very heavy agenda today. We're a little over, so I want to get to close out the meeting here. So miscellaneous matters for consideration. Anybody?
I had 2 items. You had asked for an update on the Hudson Road closure and the grant pursuit that we have.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I think Ryan Germerath has a few updates on that. And then we will also introduce our new transportation projects delivery manager. And Ryan will do that after he's done with Hudson Road.
Yep. All right, thanks, Cindy. So real quick, I'm going to run through a couple pictures here for Hudson and for 56th. So hopefully you can see the photos I have up here on the screen. So just to recap, I wanted to show condition out there just so you're all aware. I think you've seen some of these pictures before, but I'll go through them real quick. So this is 56th. So the washout that occurred back in June really wore away the edge of the road along 56. And so we have a condition where the road, you can still drive this down the center of it, but the drop off on the edge is pretty substantial. So it's not safe for the public to be traveling down it in case they were to run off the road. Hudson, by comparison, is impassable pretty much. You've all seen this picture before where the road has heaved in several locations, and very similar to 56, it has a washout along the edge of it, but it is more substantial. And we even have about a 50 to 100 foot section that's completely gone. And so that's why immediate repair was not one of the options we pursued, because the cost to do an immediate repair to get the roads back open sooner than later would have resulted in a decent amount of throwaway potentially for the grant funded project that we put in an application for the Protect grant. So going to the next picture I got. So the concept that we've come up with for the Protect grant, which we submitted back about a month ago in August, basically has some bank stabilization along the Box Elder Creek. That's what the orange you see on the map here. And then we also have some channel stabilization happening across 56 and across Hudson, where the culverts go under those 2 roads right now, to make sure that the water doesn't wear away at those walls next to the road. And then we're going to be implementing what we call low water crossings. And the side of the road is going to be armored with concrete so that the water can actually flow across the road, similar to what it did back in June, but it won't wash out Hudson or 56 in the future. And so the cost for that project is about 18 million is what that grant application that we put in for would be the total project cost. The city's putting 3.5 million in for a match, and then we also have another 3.6 million we have to put into the project to replace or to bring basically to rebuild what was out there, put it back to what was existing essentially, and then we'll enhance it from there with the Protect grant money. And then real quick on the schedule. So this is the schedule that we have in the grant. So basically we're right now almost in quarter 4 now. We should hear probably November timeframe on whether or not we get this grant. And then from there, we'll be proceeding forward assuming we get it, proceeding forward in the schedule you see here, with the roadways being back open in June of 2025. So it is a 2-year closure. We put that information out to the public a few weeks ago via a press release, just to let everybody know the timeline. And then the channel itself will be finished in April of 2026. Now, if we don't get the grant, there's the possibility of that happening, of course. We would proceed forward with probably not doing the full project that I showed with the armoring and even some of that stream stabilization, but we would rebuild the road as best as we could for a lower dollar amount to be able to get the roads back open. So that's a real quick overview of the project. We are going to start putting the RFP together for the design here in the 4th quarter of this year to be able to hit the ground running if we do get that grant award come November, so that we're able to streamline the schedule as much as possible. So that's a quick overview of that project. So I don't know if there's any other questions on that.
I appreciate that update, because we had a resident come out and talk about the closure at our last council meeting. So I just wanted to see where we were at on that. So I appreciate that. And you said this is already publicly posted, and has she been notified? So we have her contact information.
I don't believe we touched base with her, but I can definitely follow up with her to let her know status.
Yeah, I think Katie should have her information, or clerk. So
okay. Yep.
We can make sure.
I'll make sure to follow up.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate that, Ryan.
Yep. And then, yeah, Cindy also mentioned, so we have a new staff member. So Kathy Valencia, who's here on the TAPS meeting today. She's our new transportation project delivery manager, replacing Matt Kozakowski. So Kathy's already been with us for almost a month now. She started at the end of August. And so you'll see Kathy here again in the future for presentations and things like that. So she comes to us from Arapahoe County. So she's very familiar with the area already, and even knows a lot of our projects already too. So that's been very beneficial to getting up to speed on what we got going on.
Fantastic. Welcome aboard, Kathy. Good to meet you.
Thank you. Really excited to be here.
Yeah. All righty. So thank you for both of those items, Ryan. So moving on to item 6, anticipated topics for our next meeting.
Yes, and so our October agenda is actually quite full. So walking through the things that we have on the look ahead. So there had been a request to talk about micro trenching and our requirements or standards around why we don't allow it. And so we'll give an update on that, as well as any other standards we have associated with the trenching and micro trenching. Vision Zero, Carly will be giving a presentation on Vision Zero. It's going to be very similar to the presentation given at the Councilmember Marcano's ward meeting. We also have 2 IGAs coming up in October. So the Colfax BRT construction IGA, that should be coming to the committee here in October, as will the Laredo Street over Highline Canal bridge replacement project. So that'll be coming up in October. And then we also potentially have an item for council chamber ADA improvements. Now this one may or may not make it to the October agenda. It may actually be in November, but we'll see if that comes to fruition for October. And then finally, we're going to start providing some regular updates on the multimodal transportation master plan. And so that, as Carly mentioned, that project kicked off last week. And so we'll provide updates to TAPS on a regular basis on progress on that project.
Fantastic. All right, we've got a busy one to look forward to next month.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time. So I just want to confirm our next meeting is October 26th at 1 p.m. We all good with that time?
We're good.
Works for me too. Solid. All righty. With that, we are adjourned. See you all then. Have a great weekend, and I'll see some of y'all tonight.